takes us right into the first topic. And it does kind of suck, no matter what side you land on. And hands up, we're guilty right now of talking about something that I wish we didn't even have to, right? I wish we could just kind of go about our days. You said it feels like watching sports is, so divisive and almost political in a sense. But let's be real, Matt. It's only that way for one team,
Yeah.
and that's going to be kind of the center of what we're going to talk about here to open the show. Our AFC Championship recap. Kansas City wins 32-29. They are going to their fifth Super Bowl in the last 6 years, and of course, trying to cement first ever three-peat in the NFL. Now, there are some people, especially if you go on, or you were online, you were on Twitter, Facebook, etc. You saw the complaints. We all did. Now, that didn't stop people from watching. 57.7 million people estimated watched this game, which is the most of any conference championship or a divisional or wild card playoff game since 1988 at least. So the numbers say, people, whether they love them or hate them, they tune in, they watch. At the core of all this, Matt, this sport, unlike baseball and basketball these days, the NFL is king at creating emotional investment. They get fans, and it's a credit to them, and the parity with the salary cap, right? Every year, whether it's at the draft or training camp, fans believe at a minimum they might be able to compete for their division. And half the league or more thinks that they could win the Super Bowl, even if it's crazy, right?
Mm.
And when it comes to this Chiefs thing, I should first note it's obviously not super fresh. The game didn't happen yesterday. Some emotions have, come and gone. But the issue at hand, Chiefs fatigue, is a very real, warranted thing. As a Chiefs fan, as yourself being one, I think we can admit that. It is a totally understandable thing to be tired of the Chiefs and their winning. But then there is a loud minority on the internet that let that fatigue turn into what we call Chiefs derangement syndrome, CDS. And they go into these games, which we know the Chiefs play a lot of big games, even in the regular season, right? And they quote unquote hate watch. They're rooting against the Chiefs. It's not that they like the other team. They just want to see the Chiefs fail. Cool. I'm good with that. The problem is they go into those games and they're just looking for one or two things. It just takes one, really. And in this game this past Sunday, there was no more than two, we'll say, iffy, subjective calls. And they're just looking for that. And you're going to find it. You're going to find that in any NFL game. Okay, if you go in and you want to find a call where your team, quote unquote, got screwed, rigged, it's there. And so when you're looking for that, when you know the ball's kicked off, one way or another, it turns up. And that is, to a degree, what's been happening week after week now. And these people, when the Chiefs win, they go on there, they post their screenshots, their videos. They say, look, here's proof. It's rigged. Refs helped the Chiefs again. How can they do this in front of our eyes? And it's like y'all didn't have anything to say during the NFC Championship where, I mean, we saw, I know it's a legitimate rule. I've never seen refs threaten to award a touchdown against a team. That, like, people made jokes about that, but it didn't really get hot, right? There weren't people bitching about it. That's just, and I say that's one game with one example. Every game has an example if we really wanted to play it that way, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a lot to say. I'm not going to get through everything right now before I hand it to you, but I do want to say, being later in the week since this game took place, you're starting to see the stages of grief trickle on. If you're a Bills fan, you're probably still in those early stages. Sunday night, it was denial. Okay, denial, a defense mechanism where you're just kind of in shock. You're refusing to accept that Did we really just lose? It's very sudden. I mean, they had the ball in Allen's hands, 3:33 to go. I was nervous. I'm sure everybody thought, hey, good chance they're going to go down and at least tie this game. And then all of a sudden, it's just poof, over. By Monday, Tuesday, that turned into the second stage of grief, anger, which is, where that pain was really starting to set in and realization of what they had lost. And now I kind of feel like, again, we're late in the week. Maybe people, for the most part, are in the bargaining stage and they're trying to come up with explanations for why this happened again. And not just the Bills, but like all these teams that keep losing to the Chiefs in big games. And so, again, I have a lot more I could and potentially will say on this, but that's my foundation I'm going to lay and let you kind of take it from here. Because this is just hilarious at this point, the way that people are kind of going crazy.
That's a great point. And I'm kind of thinking out loud here. You mentioned Chiefs fatigue turning into Chiefs derangement syndrome. I'm thinking back to when New England was on their run. And when the Chiefs were not contenders, per se, with New England, I didn't really think much of it. I was actually like, I kind of enjoy watching New England, right? I like watching to see what Tom Brady can do. The fact that they just continually excel, it's just crazy. That's interesting to me, right? And this is something that we can look back on like, yeah, we got to see that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So is that one of those things maybe I'm not taking into account for? Maybe there's much more teams that have been touched and hurt by the Chiefs, and ultimately is what's creating so much of this.
Yes, so I had an epiphany, we'll say. I'm trying, in all these thoughts, I realize there's a bias there, but the Brady Mahomes thing is becoming realer by the year. If he wins next Sunday, there's going to be some people, me being probably one of them, who would say, let's have a real talk about that.
Yeah.
And it comes down to this, Matt. When you look at the amazing game Mahomes had Sunday, it feels like to me, we watched really most of the New England run. Didn't have a great perception of the first part of their dynasty, but we get it. Even as great as they were, I explained this to somebody this way. I feel like the Chiefs right now in this era, it's 10 to 15% harder for teams to beat them than it was at any point with the Patriots. It feels like a bigger mountain to climb. And then without diving into, super deep statistics, wouldn't you know it, Mahomes is 17-3 in playoff games. That's an 85% win percentage in the playoffs. Brady, he had a 73% win percentage. So legitimately a 12% difference. And so I feel like that kind of, added some backing to this feeling I had where it just seems like Mahomes never has a bad day in these playoff games. Like, can you ever imagine him losing a game to, let's say, a mid quarterback? How is it going to happen? He just doesn't come up short. He plays his best. He's now up to, I quoted the stats a couple weeks ago, 50 total touchdowns to 8 interceptions in playoff games. That is wow. Tom Brady. That's Tom Brady 2007.
Wow.
And so I want to give again, as the week goes on, I think common sense is starting. I'm not talking about the Twitter people, but it's starting to surface a little bit. People are getting past the emotional, being just pissed off and angry because it didn't go their way. They're starting to flush it out a little. GM for the Buffalo Bills, Brandon Beane, he speaks to the media yesterday or today, and I feel like he kept it within the lines and kept it real and just kind of said, we keep talking about what we're doing wrong and we're not really like ever giving credit to the other team for what they're doing year after year. And the fact that it's not just us, the Bills, chasing this team, it's everybody, right? Everybody is falling short. To your point, anyway, so we can continue to talk about these one or two iffy calls, or we could sit there and say, the Chiefs called Mahomes designed runs for the first time since the Super Bowl in overtime last year, they saved that stuff up for these moments, and it resulted in a touchdown. They run a formation that they had never ran before that led to Kareem Hunt's first touchdown. And you say, okay, maybe Buffalo should try that. Maybe Buffalo should take a page out of their book. It's not some big secret. Like some of these things they do, other teams are allowed to do. I'm not saying it'll work,
Right.
but there's just not enough appreciation. It's about so many of the wrong things, in my opinion, Matt. And that's fine. The wins still count the same. But
yeah. No, dude, absolutely, man. I mean, you make some excellent points there. Just to touch on that first part, we discussed that last week, right? You and I both said, I don't think you're going to see that same Chiefs team you saw in Week 11, right? I think there's more that they did not put out there, and that seemed to be true. And the thing about, the Bills, maybe they could explore that option, something like that. But I think, obviously a lot of that's Andy Reid, things like that, just having a mastermind coach and all that good stuff just coming together at the right time. If we want to talk about the specific plays, we want to do that. There's plenty of things we could point out for Buffalo, right? I mean, I don't remember the exact play, right? It was like either the first or second drive. There was an obvious, I think, defensive pass interference on Buffalo that just didn't get called. You probably remember it. I don't know if it was on Hollywood or who it was exactly. Mm-hmm. But just obvious all day. And then if that would have been on the other side of the coin, would have been a huge deal, right? And nobody even talks about this point, Brian. Christian Benford, right? Like, if the Chiefs had done what the Bills had done in that scenario, like, I get it from his point of view. If you're going to play, you're going to do everything you can to be on the field. But let's be real. I mean, that guy clearly should not have been playing. Yeah. And I don't exactly know all the fine details on how they were able to work around the concussion and ultimately get him to play. You know what I mean? Like, we can pick out different things on any which side of the way that you said. And I don't know. It's going to go round and round. And of course, we haven't really discussed this on the show or really too much in private. Like, obviously you have these talking heads that are kind of stirring the pot. Like, you've heard plenty of people talk about the Adam Schefter situation. Like, that does not help things, man. Like, it really doesn't. Like, someone that's supposed to be a cool, calm, level reporter just to tell you the facts, right? With no editorializing or anything like that, does what he does. That doesn't help things. So, I don't know, man. It's a whole weird time, to say the least.
Yeah, and the plays, okay, the two that are in question. The worthy one, I posted it on Twitter. If you slow it down, the first thing, undeniably, to touch the ball is his hand. Mm-hmm. Then Bishop kind of gets the sides of him. And I said it there too. I feel like he helped Worthy. Well, mm-hmm. he helped the ball to not move. You got 3 hands on the ball, give or take, and it was secure. And by rule, that thing, it doesn't matter if it hits the ground, if it's not moving. My take on that play is whatever the call on the field was going to stand. If they had said incomplete, it had been incomplete. If it had been an interception somehow, probably would have been an interception. But there was nothing irrefutable, indisputable about that. Same with the 4th and 1. And I'm not going to get out, some sort of ruler here and try to pretend like I know if it was good or not. It might have been. But you were 0 for 3 on that exact play. Mm-hmm. You tried it already so many times. Go to something different. This goes back to coaching. Like, how easy would it have been, Matt, for them to line up in that formation and run any type of counter off of it? Yeah. Get James Cook in the flat, whatever it is. Probably would have scored the son of a bitch. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting here arguing about a judgment call. It's like, don't put it in their hands. Don't run a play where you can't even see the ball really, and just hope that you get enough push that it's clear. Philadelphia here in a week, they're going to run that play. It's going to piss me off, but they're probably going to get it, and it's not going to be close. There's not going to be any measuring, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, great point. And here's another thing. Not enough people are talking about the Worthy catch, right? I think if you really think about it, take a step back. That was to Buffalo's benefit that they called it a catch. Because here's what I think would have happened had they not. I think Mahomes would have been able to bleed that clock dry, and he still would have found a way to score. And ultimately, with that catch happening, they scored a couple minutes sooner than they would have. That allowed Buffalo to come back and score that touchdown, right? If had that not
Good.
happened, game's over. Game's over at halftime, as far as I'm concerned, I think. And so people got to look at it that way. And you're right on the 4th and 1. Yeah, enough of the tush push. Figure something else out. Like, just fake it, push it over, do a Tim Tebow. I don't know, anything. You could have made it work. But that is what it is. And I don't know, man. It's a fascinating point. But weird times for sure. So
People are going to play the what if game. They're emotional about it. They're going to be that way with the Super Bowl too, and it's
yeah.
predictable at this point. You know, Chris Jones after the game, he's on Sports Center. He says, "As long as you guys nobody hires Steve Spagnuolo, we're going to keep winning like this."
Yeah.
Let me first say, I agree with Chris. I agree. I think Spags is amazing. That call on the 4th down, I was texting you. I mean, Hall of Famer.
Mm,
But Matt, what would the conversation be? I'm going to make a good point here, I promise. What would the
bring it.
conversation be if Steve Spagnuolo had been DC for the Chicago Bears or New York Jets for the last 5 years? You think we would look at him in this light?
Well, I think we would think of him as, he's a good DC, right? But you're not thinking of him as arguably the greatest of all time, right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
it's a product of where you are, probably.
So I bring that up again. I love Spags. Never go, never leave, please. My point is, in this world where people refuse to just appreciate what the Chiefs have right now, they are looking over the fact that it's the synergy and the force multiplication. Without one guy, it's not the same. They're not going for a three-peat if you take away Reed, Mahomes, Spags, Kelsey, Jones. There's a handful of guys there together that bring the best out of each other and make it
Mm-hmm.
this thing where no, it's not about the refs. They're just that much better than everybody else because they do have the best head coach, play caller, quarterback, pass catcher in the playoffs, defensive clutch, game wrecker, D coordinator. All those things in combination make them who they are. And it's not about the refs. I'm sorry. And I think deep down people, I understand. I can even empathize, Matt, with fatigue over a team winning. We lived it with New England. Okay, we
Mm-hmm.
touched on that. I didn't like
Yeah.
New England. I was tired of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they had legitimate scandals that you could like at least talk about,
Yeah.
Nothing's been you know. But it's on the NFL to step up and beat this team. If you do something about it, if you want something to stop, you got to do it. And because of these guys that they have and the fact that they stick together year after year, right now, it is the hardest ask we've ever seen of NFL franchises to
Mm.
beat this Chiefs team and knock them out of the playoffs year to year. Hardest thing that's ever transpired in the Super Bowl era. That's my finishing thought. And the haters can take it deep down. They know I'm right. And they know that it's going to continue to be right. And I think that makes it that much worse, man. It'd be different if Mahomes was like 37, but they
Mm-hmm.
know that this is not ending anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, excellent point, dude. It's hard to imagine all these guys that are making multi-millions and millions of dollars are able to put ego aside in order for the bigger picture. That's just not done in America at this point, or the world probably. That's so yeah, absolutely frustrating, and it feels like something that could be retooled and all that good stuff. And at the end of the day, as far as this game goes, not a lot of people are talking about it, Brian. I'm going to say it right here. Josh Allen, he just didn't play that well. He really didn't for Josh Allen's like standards, in my opinion. Made some poor decisions, some poor throws, and if you just looked in his eyes, the moment seemed a little big for him for some reason. I don't know why. He looked a little more nervous than usual. I don't know. You're right. It is what it is, and there's people gonna have to accept some reality.
Great transition. Okay, we're going to put a little bow on the Chiefs for now. Plenty of time to talk about them. Let's go into Buffalo. Let's go into even maybe a little bit of the AFC at large. But Allen, I mean, I pondered this going into the game. I feel like it's human nature as these losses continue to stack up, each next opportunity, the pressure just ramps up a little more, a little more, a little more. And I thought that was visible. The way he opened that game, the first couple drives, he wasn't playing like that in the game, the 13 seconds game. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you could tell there was a different level of pressure on him, and I gotta believe if they meet again next year, and they probably will. I don't see why it would be different, especially if it's an Arrowhead.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel like obviously it's a play here to play there. They're close, and I guess I think the fun conversation to have is this whole Michael Jordan storyline kind of continues to evolve, and guys are just being held back who otherwise might already have Super Bowl rings.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, who's gonna miss out, in these next 10 to 15 years? Not all these guys are gonna get rings. The odds of that are slim to none. And you're gonna look back one day probably and say, man, was that the year? Like, was that the one we should have had Baltimore last year, in my opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's tough. I like Josh Allen a lot, Matt, but on, on some level, maybe your take would be it's coaching. That's what I want to ask. Like, is Allen to blame at all? It sounds like you think he is a little bit, but if the coaching was just a little better, do you think maybe they do win that game?
That's a good point. I haven't really thought about it too much. I think both are at fault. Absolutely. I think, and the reason I say that is because I think in my mind, and probably yours, the
Yeah,
standard for Josh Allen is very high, right?
sure.
We've seen him play better. We've seen him execute. We've seen him look more confident. And to me, he just didn't have that on Sunday because, like you said, the pressure's going to mount. It's a snowball effect. It's going to compound over time. And you start to wonder, like even the most confident person in the back of your mind, you're going to start thinking, man, I don't know. Can I do this? And even if I do everything right, is it going to make a difference?